this video, we will talk about the relationship between learning outcomes and digital tools. We have said this before in this unit, that before even thinking about the digital tools that we want to utilize in our language classroom, we do need to think about the learning outcomes, or the things that we want our students to be able to achieve by the end of a specific lesson plan, of a specific unit. So we start then with the learning outcomes, what it is that we want our students to be able to do, the different tasks, and the different things we want them to do by the end of that lesson plan or engagement with different materials that we design. By the end of that unit, module, call it whatever you want to call it. So having that learning outcome very clear, we can think about the different tools that are available to us to help us achieve those learning outcomes. Hence the relevance of having clear learning outcomes before even thinking about technology. There are different factors that influence our decisions around the tools that we use and why we use them. And we have the institutional setting that represent things that we cannot control for reasons that are related to the organization where we're working with or within. Accessibility, those digital tools that are available and accessible in the language context, teaching context where we work. Our beliefs and our students' beliefs as well. And we can also count the institutional expectations about how we use specific digital tools. Of course, our past experiences influence the decisions we take around the different tools. So if we had positive experiences using digital tools, it is highly likely that then we might end up using those tools in our own teaching as well. The different affordances and challenges that we perceive, and remember the term affordance is used to choose those areas, those things that we perceive as being good and beneficial, those properties that we see in an artifact that we use. So this affordance is very personal to each individual. If I consider that, Zoom is a great tool for video conferencing because of X, Y, and Z reason, those reasons might be different for someone who also consider it a good tool, but maybe not perfect as I would see it, for instance, just as an example. This is another figure that you might be familiar with already, that just demonstrates or indicates the teacher decision making when we talk about, selecting, evaluating tools that can help us achieve our learning outcomes. And we know that there are asynchronous and synchronous tools. And today, in these days, there is a fine blurred line because it all depends on how we use different technology. Sometimes, for instance, when we are using instant messaging, we might be actively talking to somebody else that is actively responding, but you might get to the point where you send a message and the person responds to it a few minutes, hours, or days later. So asynchronous tools, are tools that you can use over time that they're there for people to engage with, such as online discussions, polls, quizzes, email is a good example of it. Video recordings, such as this one, so it's going to be there. You can, watch again this video, and it'll be playing. You can pause it. You can interact with it in a way that suits your time. Synchronous tools, things that we use, live, that is instant live right there and then, such as the virtual classroom, for instance. If you are having a session online through Zoom, TikTok, WeChat, or Google Meet, there you go. Live polling, live quizzes, live text. More examples of synchronous and asynchronous communication. And yeah, we know then that different tools are designed for different purposes. We know that if you know a bit of history regarding digital tools, Web 1 tools refer to those tools that are more given or used when we want to give some input. For instance, you have a language school and you create a digital page, a website where people can read about your school, the content, the kind of activities, curriculum, your teachers, your staff, and so on and so forth. So there's only read purposes. But if you incorporate elements where you want to interact with people who read your materials, we get into the Web 2 tools that have this extra element or participatory element, communicative element, such as Facebook, Instagram, WeChat, WhatsApp, YouTube, Bilibili as well. They do have this section of comments where people can interact together. Snapchat, Dropbox, and some blogs as well. People create blogs or video blogs, and they do have these additional tools embedded there because they want to have that participatory dimension. And Web3 tools that are, they don't use intermediaries, they're decentralized. A lot of them are managed through AI technology or involve AI technology, where the computer is reading your input and making suggestions to you. For instance, if you buy something from Amazon, the next thing you see is, suggestions from the computer giving you, you might want to buy this and that. Other people have found this useful. You might like to buy it. So it reads into your needs and, based on the input of information that you give. In 2022, these were the different social platforms that were used more often. And this has changed over time. So you could visit that link here to see what the current figure shows. We have QQ, Snapchat, Weibo, TikTok, WeChat, Instagram, and Facebook is, what's leading the social platform. But that was 2022. 2023, again, on a more global scale, the different tools were used. Facebook, WeChat, VK, Instagram. Again, you can visit these links here to have the most recent statistics. But then why do we want to talk about tools? Because we, as teachers, we need to think about how we can utilize different tools to achieve our learning outcomes. And to utilize tools, we do need to get into evaluating them or assessing them or seeing, what affordances they have for us to then be able to choose them. We have Jane Hart that, divides different tools into different purposes. So we have tools for our personal learning in the red circle, tools for our workplace, and tools for education. And these are just some examples, of course. It doesn't involve all the contexts. You might find that there might not be tools that you actually use in your classes, in your learning, or in your personal life, because you might be from a different place in the world. But you can think about the tools that are similar in your context that fit into these different categories that she designs or categorizes tools. There you go. Jane's lists categories. There's another example of the different categories that she utilizes. And the idea then is to get you thinking about how you can start evaluating whether tools are going to be useful or not to help you achieve your learning purposes. So if you start thinking about what is on your list of tools and why, that could be a good starting point. You can also think about evaluating the kind of interaction that the tools enable you to engage with. For instance, interaction among students, instructor, or teacher and students and the course content. That would be, another thing to consider. Consider the structure and the dialogue, the contextual factors that we mentioned before, and of course, don't forget the learning outcomes. So, in what way these tools help you to scaffold that learning so that you can achieve that main big language learning purpose that you have designed. Other points of reflection on the affordances and challenges of these tools to help you evaluate whether they are relevant or not is to think about the modes of learning, the teacher role, the learners themselves. And we have some questions that you can ask yourself, such as, what, choices does a tool give you? How do they affect the role of the teacher or the student, or that relationship between the teacher and student? What makes it a good tool and why? What kind of criteria do you use or have in your mind to think about this tool as a good tool? But also, don't forget that what we do a lot with digital tools is to promote different digital literacy skills. So what skills, does this tool help you to promote? You can go back all the way to theory and check, the kind of mediations that these technologies provide, the kind of engagement with the learner. And again, there are more questions that you can ask yourself. What does the selection of tools say about your understanding of how students learn? Or, what does the selection of tools say about your students' needs? Those synchronous and asynchronous tools lead to different forms of learning or engagement with materials. What about the learning outcomes of engagement through these tools? So as you can see, we always go back to that idea of learning outcomes. And that's what we need to consider when we are evaluating a tool. More points of reflection for you to think of as you are selecting new technologies that emerge on, day-to-day basis. And I like this set of principles, or you can see it as well as a checklist that is provided for, teachers to think about tools and evaluating them, to see if they're good and appropriate for our teaching context and our learning outcomes. So you can think about whether they encourage students' interaction, reciprocity, cooperation, motivation, active learning, the kind of feedback that they promote, the time on task, the expectations, the different talents of ways of learning. So this is, again, a way in which you can think about to evaluate those specific tools. So there's no right or wrong way of doing this. There's no recipe. You do need to reflect on your teaching context on your students, on the affordances of different technologies, and then, make your decision making very explicit, rationalizing it. And you also, as the reading chapel, can think of different dimensions that are mentioned in that reading. So don't forget to read that book chapter as well to complement these ideas around evaluation of technologies. More references if you want to engage with more reading as usual. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.